She came late to the blind date, her shoes soaked, hair tangled from the rain, and her heartbeat trembling like the sky above her. The restaurant lights glowed softly against the glass as she stood outside watching happy couples laugh inside. Her reflection stared back at her, a woman in a worn-out dress, clutching her purse like it held the last piece of her dignity. Everyone else arrived in cars or cabs. She had walked 5 miles, in the rain. But the storm outside was nothing compared to the one waiting quietly inside her heart. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the quiet beauty of people who never give up, please take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe. It helps stories like this one reach hearts that might need them today. Her name was Elena Marsh, 32 years old, working 2 jobs in a small town that always seemed to forget her name. By day, she was a waitress in a dusty diner on the edge of Main Street. By night, she cleaned offices downtown, places filled with people who never noticed the janitor who picked up their forgotten coffee cups. Her life had become a rhythm of exhaustion and quiet endurance. Yet somewhere inside her, beneath all the fatigue, she still believed in something small but powerful. Hope. The blind date wasn't her idea. Her best friend Clara had begged her for weeks to meet someone kind, educated, and patient. His name was Ryan, a quiet architect who had recently moved back to town. He's not like the others, Clara promised. He listens. Elena almost said no. She'd been through too many disappointments. Men who vanished after one dinner, men who saw her kindness as weakness, and men who looked past her because she wasn't glamorous or loud. But something about the way Clara spoke, the way she believed in her, made Elena think, maybe, just maybe. She didn't have much. Her only dress was a faded navy blue one she'd bought secondhand 3 years ago. Her shoes had worn soles, but she cleaned them, until they shone faintly. The rain had started unexpectedly that evening, just as she was about to catch the bus. But the bus never came. She stood there for 20 minutes under the dim yellow light of the street lamp, rain soaking through her thin jacket. Her phone battery had already died after a long shift, and she couldn't call for help. The restaurant was 5 miles away. She had 2 choices: go home and text Clara tomorrow with another excuse, or start walking. So she walked. Each step felt heavier than the last. The pavement gleamed with puddles, and her breath formed little clouds in the cold air. Her mind kept whispering that she should turn back, that no one would wait that long, that she would look ridiculous showing up drenched and late. But something stronger inside her kept pushing forward. She had walked through worse storms in life. Storms of loneliness, debt, grief, and fear. Tonight, she decided she wouldn't let another one stop her. By the time she reached the restaurant, nearly an hour and a half had passed. Her feet ached, and her dress clung to her like wet paper. She hesitated before going in, knowing she looked nothing like the confident woman she had imagined in her head. People turned their heads when she entered, some out of curiosity, others with faint amusement. She ignored them. She scanned the room, searching for him. Ryan sat near the window. He looked up from his phone just as she approached. His eyes widened for a moment, not in judgment, but in surprise. Elena braced herself for the awkward silence, the excuse, the polite goodbye. Instead, he stood up, slowly, and then he smiled. She apologized before she even sat down, her voice trembling as she tried to explain the rain, the bus, the walk. He just nodded and said softly, "You walked 5 miles. To meet me?" His tone wasn't disbelief, it was awe. She laughed nervously, tucking a wet strand of hair behind her ear, muttering something about not wanting to waste the reservation. He looked at her for a long moment, then said, "I'm really glad you came." That simple sentence broke something inside her. Not in a painful way, but in a way that let light in through the cracks. As they talked, Elena began to feel something she hadn't in a long time, seen. Ryan didn't ask what kind of car she drove or what brand her dress was. He asked what she loved to do when she wasn't working. She told him about her late-night sketches, the ones she drew on napkins during diner breaks. He listened. When she laughed about her clumsy attempts at painting, he didn't laugh at her. He leaned closer and asked what colors she liked most. The rain outside softened to a drizzle, and for the first time in years, Elena didn't feel rushed. Time moved differently with him. There was a stillness, a safety in his company. But even in that warmth, a shadow lingered in her heart. She worried that when he found out how ordinary her life was, he would fade like the rest. She tried to keep her words light, but Ryan noticed. "You keep apologizing," he said quietly as they finished dessert. "For being late, for walking, for existing. You don't have to." Tears filled her eyes before she could stop them. No one had ever said that to her. When they left the restaurant, he offered her his jacket. It was far too big for her, but it was warm and smelled faintly of cedar and rain. He walked her halfway home before she insisted he stop. She didn't want him walking another 5 miles back. He hesitated, but smiled and said, "Next time I'll pick you up." No more walking. Elena didn't think there would be a next time. Life had taught her not to expect too much. But 2 days later, Ryan showed up at the diner during her shift. He sat at the counter, quietly drinking coffee, waiting until her break. He didn't care that she wore an apron and smelled faintly of frying oil. He said she looked beautiful. For weeks, they met like that. Brief moments in between her shifts, little pockets of peace in her. Otherwise, chaotic days. Ryan learned how hard she worked, how she was saving up to go back to art school someday. He never pitied her. He admired her. And slowly, she started believing she was worth admiring. But just when things began to feel brighter, life tested her again. One night, on her way home, Elena was hit by a passing car that sped through a red light. It wasn't fatal, but it left her with a fractured leg and months of recovery ahead. Her job at the diner couldn't hold her position, and bills began to pile up. She told Ryan not to visit. She didn't want him to see her broken, helpless. He came anyway, every single day. He brought her groceries, books, and even small canvases to paint on. When she grew frustrated at her crutches, he sat with her and listened, never judging her anger or pain. He told her that strength wasn't about walking through rain or pretending to be fine. It was about showing up even when it hurt. That winter, as snow covered the town, Ryan asked her to paint something for him. She hesitated, saying she hadn't painted in years, but he insisted, so she did. It was a small painting of a woman walking through a storm, her dress fluttering, her eyes fixed ahead. When she showed it to him, he smiled and said, "That's you." Elena cried, not because she was sad, but because for the first time in her life, she saw herself the way someone kind saw her, not as a survivor, but as someone still becoming. Months later, when she could finally walk again, Ryan took her to that same restaurant. This time, she wasn't late. She wore a simple green dress he had helped her buy, and when she stepped inside, the waiter smiled. Remembering her from that rainy night, Ryan held her hand across the table, and she realized she wasn't walking alone anymore. Her journey, every tired step, every heartbreak, every mile, had led her here. To this table, to this love that didn't ask her to be perfect, just present. If this story has touched your heart or reminded you of the power of kindness, please like, share, and subscribe to help it reach more people who need a little hope tonight. And before you go, leave a comment below and tell us what's one small act of kindness or courage that changed your life or someone else's. That night, when Elena walked out of the restaurant beside Ryan, she glanced at the sky, clear, starlit, peaceful. She smiled softly, thinking how once she had walked 5 miles alone through the storm. But this time, she didn't have to walk alone anymore.